Well, if it is, it's a mystery to me and all of her doctors. Rarely, but on more than one occasion over the last many, many years, the same sort of things happened to her when she just got severely dehydrated. And she's worked like a demon. She's worked like a demon. She's worked like a demon. She's worked like a demon, as you know, as Secretary of State and as a senator, and in the years since.
But more importantly, she's on a grueling campaign.
Yeah.
And you know what that's like, and she's older than you were when you ran.
And she had two and a half hard days before the day when she got dizzy.
Hey, what's up guys? Gonzo here for the Face Like the Sun YouTube channel. You know, I haven't really talked a whole lot about politics on this channel, mainly because I didn't want to add to the plethora of places where you can get information about what's going on out there. We've seen, I think, with this election, the rise of the alternative media, and, you know, whether you think it's controlled opposition or whatever, you know, outlets like InfoWars with Alex Jones, Drudge Report, AMTV with Christopher Green, and the many other independent reporters and journalists out there bringing the truth. Because, you know, what happened when the corporate interests, the global elite bankers took over all of the official media outlets, the art of journalism, the integrity of journalism died, you know, within these major outlets. But hardcore journalism survives, and it's always going to survive. And that's where the alternative media comes in, where these people, especially with this use of technology, have been able to relay stories and capture important world events that get shared all around the world instantaneously. And there's been this, quite accurately, an information war between the establishment and this rising alternative class, so to speak, or group that we all seem to be loosely part of, especially here in America, especially independent media outlets such as this channel. We're all sort of speaking our mind, speaking about topics that we find are important, both intellectually but also spiritually. And this really carnal side to all of this is politics. And so I've observed this entire thing from a little bit further back, because as soon as I start sticking my head into any kind of avenue or any kind of angle, I feel so drenched in bias and propaganda, and that goes all directions, you know. It doesn't matter if it comes from alternative media, but especially the mainstream media. It just feels like I'm getting my perceptions shaped, and it's hard to get to the bottom of anything. And we're forced to choose sides, and I don't like that. It doesn't sit well with me in my gut, and it never has, this idea that we have to divide over a candidacy and all this. At the same time, I feel I have a duty to continue to relay my thoughts on these issues, because I do have them, and I do want to share it with you and be honest about those thoughts, because otherwise, why do we have this platform, right, if we can't be honest?
Fringe right-wing websites have been promoting conspiracy theories.
So this recent thing with Hillary Clinton stumbling and falling and being captured on film, this really is a game changer in my opinion, or could be a major game changer, because this really, to the public, to the undecided public, this should be a nail in the coffin in terms of the fate of Hillary Clinton, not so much pro-Trump, just in terms of, you know, all these media outlets, alternative media outlets, raising suspicion, raising questions about Hillary's health for the last several months, and watching the mainstream media just poo-poo it aside. Oh, those crazy conspiracy theorists, they don't know what they're talking about. And then something like this happens, and it sort of puts a nail in the coffin, like, we've been saying this forever. And they're trying to, oh, it's just pneumonia, even though Hillary hugs a little child after the story comes out that she has pneumonia, apparently. You're not supposed to be hugging people, especially kids, when you have pneumonia. Probably not the best idea. Anyway, there's definitely a changing of the guard in terms of the rise of an alternative media, and a real tangible change in terms of the direction of where things were headed, right? We've been steadily marching down this road to totalitarianism, this global totalitarianism under the UN or whoever, and this propaganda has really spoken to a generation who believe that there is this desire, necessity to unite as a globe, a world, and, you know, celebrate humanity and all these things. And sure, yeah, we certainly are rooting for humanity. Hey, we're humans. But there is a level of hubris within these philosophies that have become very popular amongst kids. And I bring this up because this whole system, I have to use these words to label them. I'm going to use the word liberalism, And when I say liberalism, the way I define it is not in the simple way of a worldview or philosophy, a political philosophy that's based on the ideas of liberty and equality, because I think all of us have that innate desire to see a world that has liberty and equality for all, right? I mean, we want to see that happen. Now, it's only when there are financial interests, personal interests, and power and things like that, that, you know, the larger class gets oppressed for the sake of a few who have the leverage. And that's been where people have been irresponsible. But it also reflects this really deep biblical truth that man's heart is corrupt. This thing called sin has entered into the world. And it's really, politics, I think, is one of the best evangelical tools, because you look and it's like, hey, guys, there is no political system that can solve a very deep human problem, which is in the human heart. This is not a systematic problem, because systems all have pros and cons, right? Systems philosophically can work. That's why I think there's a lot of people that relate to the socialistic kinds of thought and philosophy. There's an appeal to this communistic idea, you know, in terms of this deep desire to have liberty and equality for all. So I understand that thinking, but when I say that, liberalism, I want to expand the definition or drill it down a little bit more in finer detail. And this is where my contention comes in, and where I, you know, disagree with presuppositionally with this side of the aisle, so to speak, is because their moral philosophy, you know, in order to have this philosophy that's founded on liberty and equality, you have to have an objective point of moral reference. If you don't, then you're arguing about nothing. You know, you can't have liberty and equality unless there is an innate objective moral foundation that's actually being violated. And this sort of thing is consistent with what liberals say. They're saying there's, you know, things that are unfair, things that aren't right. There needs to be better treatment and equality, blah, blah, blah. Well, you can't have that kind of thinking without an objective point of moral reference. And the big issue is this steps right into the moral argument for God. As Dr. William Lane Craig has argued, 1, if God does not exist, objective moral values do not exist, right? And we can break that down. I mean, Dr. William Lane Craig has broken it down more than sufficiently, in my opinion, and has really upheld that statement to be true, that premise to be true, and has shown it in many different ways, even showing atheists who would agree with that statement. And then number 2, objective moral values do exist. Those who would identify with the liberal side of the aisle are appealing to an objective moral point of reference when they say, we want equality, we want liberty, you know, for this race or this class or this group of people or whatever it is. So if objective moral values do exist, then therefore God exists. So let me go through that real quick one more time. 1, if God does not exist, objective moral values do not exist. Number 2, objective moral values do exist. 3, therefore God exists. The thing is, when people use the word liberal, right, they really associate that with sort of the anti-conservative, anti-religious, anti-Christian, anti-whatever. And most of the time, there's a little overlap, obviously, and, you know, some mixtures of groups and stuff like that. But for the most part, those who believe in sort of the liberal philosophies don't believe in God. But that inherently is the most hypocritical thing you can do, because your own argument, your own title of liberalism, which again is a philosophy or worldview that supports the idea of equality and liberty, that itself requires an objective point of moral reference by which can only exist if God exists. So you are denying the very foundation of what gives you the right to even say that there is inequality, that there is a lack of liberty here. So there's some thoughts there, some ramblings. I don't know how we got from Hillary Clinton to the moral argument for the existence of God, but there you go. I think politics, ultimately, when you take a sociological approach to it, because I think politics, because it appeals to your emotions, because it strikes at your beliefs and your convictions, and you assign it to a party or a group or a person to represent you, you can get lost in idolatry of worshiping an individual to represent you, you know? this sort of thing can easily happen and does happen. But as more and more people wake up to the reality of what's happening in terms of the actual inequality and the actual lack of liberty and the actual corruption in our political systems, it's certainly reaching a tipping point. And I think this election cycle has been very indicative of that fact, that there is this swell from the masses because we have a voice now to actually cause real change. And not that, Donald Trump was the effect of this change, but I'm saying slowly, it feels like the pendulum is starting to swing the other direction. And as a church, as a praying people, I think it's our duty to delay the decay, right? Because we know things are going to go a certain direction. God already has things planned out. He is in complete control. In his time, things will happen. And who knows? The elite may pull off something ridiculous as they are running out of time. Their time is running short in terms of this era of influence and power through the corporate interests and political institutions. This is largely why there's going to be this internet handover that Obama is putting together. It's ridiculous, folks. I have some more thoughts on that whole thing that I'll do in another video, but I hope that gives you something to think about in terms of politics. Take a break if you're really super deep into all this stuff. Step back and look at how real change can happen, and that's through the power of the Holy Spirit because of what Jesus Christ did on the cross. And that's the true solution, right? He gets to the heart of the issue quite literally by defeating death, defeating sin. He is the blueprint for the solution of mankind. And really, if you think about it, this utopia that we all envision, right? This sort of heavenly state, this place where there's world peace and there's this equality and liberty and freedom. This ideal place is the new heaven and the new earth, and it's going to be ruled by God. And that's the only way that things are going to be right, because obviously with humans in charge, look at the mess we're in. So again, hope this gives you something to think about. Have an awesome day, guys. God bless.